review. Book one is about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She is the author of the book Teaching Freedom, no other than Miss Marsha Familaro Enright.
Hello, Daniel. Nice to be here.
Welcome to Book 101, Miss Marsha. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
I'm an educator and a writer and speaker who lives in Chicago, and I've been working on the problems of education for over 35 years. When I was a child, I loved school, and I was very annoyed at the children who were fooling around in class because they were interrupting me until I realized that they were frustrated. And I said to myself, well, I don't want that for my own children. I want a kind of education that they will love to go to school. So I had that in my mind for a long time. And when I was about 20, I came across some articles about the Montessori method. And I read them and I said, this sounds exactly what I would like. So when my oldest child was ready to go to elementary school, he went to a Montessori preschool. And when he went to elementary school, there was a problem about not having a Montessori school that I liked. So I helped start one with some other parents, and that got me started into the problems of education. And I ran that school for 27 years. The Montessori method, I don't know if your viewers know about it, is absolutely wonderful. It's very individualized, is developmentally oriented, and children thrive in it. And an example of this is that I had letters from many parents over the years who told me, my child loves school so much that when he's sick, he lies to me so he won't miss school. So that was a wonderful experience for my children and the children who went to the school. And the school is still in existence right now and does a wonderful job. My grandchildren are going there. But I myself was always interested I ran the school, but my teaching interest was always in young adults. And I could see a long time ago what was happening in the colleges, that they were not getting the kind of education that they should. And I was very concerned about the kind of education they were getting. Was it preparing them to live in a free society? Because, in a free society, you have to be independent. You have to be able to think for yourself. You have to be able to take care of yourself, be self-reliant. And I didn't think, and you have to know about the history of the world and what's happened in different places under different forms of government, and why free societies are the best form of living for people. So I said to myself, I think we need something for young adults in this respect. And I started a summer program 15 years ago. I put everything I knew into it in terms of, I was bringing the Montessori method up to the college level. I put everything I knew into it, including the kinds of things that we study and the activities that we do. And it's a week-long program. And by the end of the first week, even I was surprised at the results, because I had so many of the students come to me and say, my life has been transformed by this program, because now I can judge anything for myself and I have a lot of confidence. And they formed very great relationships with each other. And they're still in touch with me today. Many of them came multiple times to the program. So about 4 years ago, I was given a very large donation to my organization, and that enabled me to start working on opening a new college, which we're going to open, called Reliance College. It's like an expanded version of the summer program, very rigorous liberal arts program combined with skills like reasoning, special writing, learning about finance, learning about economics, and having an experience every year of working in the area of your professional interest. So this is where what I'm working on right now. And in the meantime, I have written many articles about education, about the psychological side of education, which I think has been long neglected. In other words, what are the optimal conditions for people to learn, to make them really enjoy the learning and want to know more. And I've put a lot of my thoughts about this and my research in it in this book, Teaching Freedom.
Miss Marsha, thank you so much for
Thank you.
sharing your knowledge to the world. And how do you define freedom in the context of education?
Well, freedom, first, in the wider cultural sense, I define freedom as the ability to make your own choices and implement them in action without interference from others, without the use of force on you from others, and for you to equally respect the rights of others. So you have individual rights. In education, I define it as the educational institute or the environment is oriented to really helping you figure out not only get the skills you need to thrive as an adult, but also figure out what's best for yourself and to pursue your own individual interests so that you can live a well-lived life.
So, Miss Marsha, were there a specific moment or historical influence that shaped your views on education and liberty?
A specific moment. I think, I don't know, I think I always personally experience the importance of freedom because I think it's important to be able to think for yourself. I always was trying to make up my own mind. I was trying to discover what the facts were, how to think well about things, how to come to a good conclusion. And this happened since I was a child. When I was a teenager, I started reading books that were represented the kind of people that were able to think for themselves, and I started learning about that more and more. Are you wondering about what particular writers or anything like that?
Yes,
Okay.
indeed.
S okay, so the book that sent me off on this course was The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand,
Yes.
and that was very influential on me in its representation. I remember when I read it when I was about 16 years old, and I said to myself, wow, this is so much of what I think, but really well organized. So I, I went on to read her other works and got very interested in her ideas. And then from there, I was led to learn about a lot of other writers in the freedom movement, such as the economists Frederick Bastiat, Karl Menger, Ludwig von Mises, and then on into historically important figures such as John Locke, who the founders of the United States were very, very influenced by, the Baron de Montesquieu, whom the founders were very influenced by, Alexis de Tocqueville, who was a French aristocrat who came over to the US in about 1830 and ended up writing a book about the culture of the US called Democracy in America, because remember, this was the first experiment in self-government ever. So
Yes.
he was a French aristocrat and he was very interested in how it was working out. And that book to this day is extremely influential and surprising because if you read it, it um, it has a description of the U.S. So many of its commentaries about the U.S. are true today to this day. So
Certainly. So, Miss Marsha, let's talk about the core concept and philosophy of the book. What are the key principles or values that define education for free society?
the core values are great respect for the individual and the individual student's path, uh, making sure that the educational environment teaches that individual the kind of skills and thinking and clarity of thinking that they need in order to uh, thrive as an adult. Uh, Having a remembering one of the things that I bring up in my book is that if you think about it, the classroom is a micro society in which you can learn how to behave. And traditional classrooms are rather authoritarian. The teacher has the knowledge, the teacher is the person who's going to tell you what's true, what's false, and you as the student are supposed to absorb this and then turn around and prove to the teacher that you learned what they taught you. But is that preparing somebody for being an independent human being? Because as an independent human being, you have to be able to read something, you have to be able to judge a situation and people by yourself without an authority telling you what's right and wrong. So I think the environment that is best for children and for young adults in that respect is one which teaches them those skills, which gives them something which de Tocqueville called the apprenticeship of freedom, because he said that it was surprising the pilgrims, the settlers who came over to the US in the 1600s, they basically were self-governing for about 200 years because the British Empire, it was too poor of a place for the British Empire to bother with us. And in that respect, they had a lot of practice in self-governance. So in the classroom, what you want to do is give the student a lot of responsibility and freedom in a structured environment. That's the principle of a Montessori classroom. So the student has a lot of freedom to choose what work he's working on, when he's working on. Does he want to do math first? Does he want to do reading first? Does he want to work on art? Does he want to work on his practical skills? Which he chooses the order. It's just like an adult. When an adult has a complex job, they decide, well, I'm going to call my salesperson first, and then I'm going to write the memo, and then I'm going to figure out what plan we should use to implement that policy. So you want to give the child or the student in the older classrooms a lot of experience of that kind of thing. So that's some of the principles behind it. That if you create the micro society of the classroom in which the teacher is a guide, not an authority, they're authoritative in that they have a lot of knowledge that can be used to help the child, to help the student, can guide the students, can be a resource for the students. But the teacher is creating an environment in which the student is taking a lot of responsibility and figuring out what the truth is for themselves.
So,
Is that
Miss
clear at
Marsha,
all? Or
yes,
okay,
indeed.
okay.
Very clear, Miss Marsha. So, in what ways can schools promote a critical thinking without imposing ideological bias?
Well, for one thing, you want to make sure that when you're teaching any subject, you teach the student the ideas across the ideological spectrum. So, for example, in politics, you teach Marx and you teach Locke, but you also teach the child or the student the skills of logic and reasoning, whether both in the way that you're teaching in the classroom. For example, in our classrooms, we all read the same text together, say an essay by Locke. Then we come together and we have a collaborative discussion in which we discuss, well, how did we understand this essay? What were our problems with what he said here or there? And how can we understand it? And we help each other understand the essay, but we have to use reason and evidence for any opinion that we have about what the writing was about. Now, what happens in this situation is you both, the student both strengthens their own reasoning ability, and they learn how to look for evidence and to have the right evidence to come to justify their opinion. But they also learn from the way the other people in the classroom are thinking, because not everybody approaches something the same way. And sometimes you learn, oh, I never thought about thinking of it, from this point of view or that point of view. And in this respect, this kind of environment develops your toolbox of thinking by helping you learn different ways that people think. And in this kind of environment, this kind of discussion, the teacher is there not to tell you what is in the thing that you're reading, but to help each student figure out that for themselves by asking good questions.
So, Miss Marsha, what will be your advice for those people out there want to teach in a freedom way, as you mentioned in the book?
They have to start thinking about how to what's called flip the classroom. In other words, don't lecture, but instead use the time in the classroom to help the students understand the material and use what's called formative assessment, not summative assessment. So, summative assessment is when you give the students something to read or to learn, and then at the end, you give them a test to see how much they learned. Formative assessment is when, as you're going along, you're questioning the student, you're listening to the student about what confusions they might have, maybe in learning a math skill, and you're giving them feedback as you go along. When you do that, this is one of the beauties of having these collaborative discussions or having discussions in classrooms, the right kind of discussion in a classroom, a reason and evidence oriented discussion, is that you hear how the student is thinking, and you can find out where maybe they're making a mistake or they're confused, and you can help them go along with it. One of the things that I talk about in my book is that lectures are great for giving you a kind of a summary of what the subject is, and I think it's most valuable these days to find the best lecturers on any particular subject. We're very fortunate now because we have so much rich material on the internet that we can do this. Instead of just any old person teaching you physics, you go and watch a lecture by Walter Lewin, who was from MIT, and he's supposed to have these great demonstrations of physics principles. So the student can do that by themselves, and then in the classroom, you can use that time to help unpack, well, what did this person say in the lecture, and how did you understand the principles they were talking about? And maybe we can do an experiment. Because when you listen to a lecture, the problem is that you can get lost, and the lecture just keeps going, right? But if you're listening to a lecture that's online, of course, you can stop it and then you can go back and listen to it again. And then when you go to class and you discuss it, you can try to determine what your confusions are and try to straighten them out. The people who are really good at listening to lectures have a kind of inner dialogue going on with the lecturer. They're listening to what the lecturer is saying, and they're comparing it to what they know, and they're trying to understand the logic. But a lot of people don't know how to do this. So that's why these collaborative discussions are really good for people.
So, Miss Marsha, thank you for your advice. And what will be your short-term and long-term goals in writing?
My short-term goals are to make more people aware of this kind of approach to education, and to connect the dots for many parents who are looking. Nowadays there's a lot of turmoil in education. Parents saw what was going on in school during the pandemic in these Zoom classes, and many of them were very disturbed by what their children were being taught. So there's a lot of turmoil going on. Parents are looking for, and older students too, are looking for a better way to be educated. And so my short-term writing is oriented towards helping them figure out what's best for them. And my long-term writing, of course, is to expand even more and more about what is the best approach to education.
Good luck to your goals, Miss Marsha, and
Thank you.
looking forward for more and more empowering books like this. So let's talk about the implementation and action of the book. What steps can educators take today to start implementing the ideas in teaching freedom?
They need to figure out how to do these collaborative discussions and incorporate it into what they're doing. They need to look at what are the texts that they're using and look for the very best writers in history. This is one of the reasons why I use what's called the great books or classics. These are the books that have been the most influential in history and which affect your thinking today, whether you know it or not, because their ideas are part of what created our culture. So be very aware of what materials are being used, and help the students learn how to reason. So incorporate different kinds of lessons in reasoning and logic in what you're doing. And also connect what you're learning in the classroom to the real world. So if you're learning an idea in the classroom, whether it's about physics or whether it's about psychology or whether it's about history or politics, help the student figure out what is that connection between this idea and what happens in the real world, so that they see the way in which ideas affect us everywhere. Because whether they know it or not, they're going to be affected by ideas in their adult life. And it's better if you're more aware of what ideas are affecting you, because then you can decide, well, I agree with that or I don't agree with that, and this is how I'm going to live. Another thing is to teach in a way that helps people connect the dots between the different subject areas. What happens right now is subject areas tend to be separated. You learn science, then you learn literature, and then you learn history. And the students don't learn what are the connections between those things. And yet the connections are really important, because science didn't advance in a vacuum, just like, just super rational and everything. It was quite influenced by what was going on in the history, in the world around it, so historically, and how people approach ideas, how they fight with each other over ideas. I mean, I think it was, I don't remember who the thinker was. I think it was a physicist who said science advances one funeral at a time. And that's
Yes.
because, yeah, that's because it's so hard for people who are already believe a certain theory and whose careers are invested in that theory to change their minds when the evidence changes.
Very well said, Miss Marsha.
Thank
Very
you.
well said.
Thank you.
So, are there particular schools, models, or movements that you believe are already living out this philosophy?
Well, for the lower schools, like in elementary school, many Montessori schools are very well implement the method, and children do extremely well in it. I mean, parents have to learn enough about Montessori to be able to judge for themselves whether the school is implementing it authentically, because it's not trademarked. The term is not trademarked, and people, there's a lot of pressure. The Montessori program is so different from traditional school. For example, we have hundreds of what we call materials, which are like games that teach the children use to learn the different concepts, whether it's math, whether it's language, history, geography. So the children have a very close connection with the real world in a way, because they're using their hands, they're manipulating the materials. And the classroom is organized so that the child can freely move around and can decide, oh, I'm going to sit at the desk, or I'll sit on the floor, or I'm going to sit at the table, I'm going to work by myself, or I'm going to work with my friends. All the materials are arrayed on low shelves where the child can go get them in the order of difficulty and in their subject area. So the child has a lot of freedom. It goes back to that principle I mentioned, freedom in a structured environment. They have to act within a certain way. They can't just take the materials and throw them up in the air and play ball with them or anything like that. But within certain limits, they have a lot of choice in what they're doing. And the classrooms are organized in multiple ages together to give a wide variety of learning in there, and also because the younger children learn from the older children, and the older children solidify their learning by helping the younger children. So there's a lot of differences between a Montessori school and traditional schools, and the parents need to highly educate themselves about it. There's lots of publications about that now. There's a book called The Montessori Way by Tim Selden that I highly recommend. There's the American Montessori Society has a lot of material. The Association Montessori International does. So for the lower schools, those are being implemented. Those are the ones I would recommend. And there's some other schools that are similar that are very good. And then for the upper level, there's some schools that are more oriented towards using the collaborative seminars and using the classics. For example, there's two small colleges called St. John's, not St. John's University, but St. John's College in Annapolis and one in Santa Fe that have good method. And there's other schools like that around the country, but not very many.
So, Miss Marsha, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Law 101. In its first season, People First Season, with Mr. Andy Semachuk. Please do listen to our latest episode. We are talking about Mr. Donald Trump global visa. So, please do listen, Law 101, wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Marsha, if readers take away just one idea from teaching freedom, what do you hope it is?
To be respectful of the individual. And I meant to say that to invite people to see what we're going to do with the college that we're opening, Reliance College, in 2026. And please feel free, if anybody's interested, in contacting me if they have any questions, if they want more information, not only about the college, but about any of these ideas.
Miss Marsha, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your book as well as your advocacy?
Oh, for sure. So my book's available on Amazon.com. And I also have a lot of writing online at Marsha-Familaro-Enright.com if anybody's interested in that. So
Yes, people, let's support Miss Marsha because if you support her, as I said, more and more and more empowering books like this to come. So, Miss Marsha, thank you so much for your time.
thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
More to come, people. See you soon.